of you, or maybe all of you know who I am at this stage, but I am a mother of two. I'm married to Jim. I have two children, Amelia and Dara. Amelia is 15, Dara is almost 10. I worked in education all my life. I'm one of those people who went to college and never left, really. My mother always kind of said to me, you know, you'll never leave that place. You know, I was always one of those students who never wanted to leave. I couldn't imagine working outside of a university, kind of third level environment. I loved it that much. Education really was hugely important to me. And I worked in different areas. I worked first for a number of years as I managed the international program for the University of Limerick, and I established the Erasmus exchange program. So if you go to college anywhere in Ireland, you can go on an exchange to France or Spain or Germany or further afield. And I built up the program in Limerick and UL to be one of the biggest ones in the country. And then I moved to WIT. When I got married, we moved back home. I'm a Kilkenny woman, for anyone out there now. Don't say anything to me about the hurling. I don't want to hear it. So I'm a Kilkenny woman living in Limerick. But we moved back home for a couple of years and we got married, and I moved then and started working in WIT, totally different area. I started working in adult literacy. I managed the National Literacy Development Centre at WIT, and would have done a bit of teaching as well, teaching adult educators. So we were basically kind of train the trainers. So we would have been teaching adults who teach adults with literacy difficulties, and I absolutely loved it. I really, really, you know, it's the best job I've ever had, I have to say. I totally enjoyed kind of bringing people along. I suppose because of my passion for education, for me it was very important to be able to give back and to help people who didn't get a chance at education for whatever reason when they were growing up. So a lot of adults come back to education when they have kids, and when the kids start school and they're worried about trying to help them to do homework. And that was a huge thing for a lot of adults. And some people are fascinated and kind of horrified when I say to them that there are still adults in this country who have difficulty reading and writing. But, you know, there's about 25%. It's a big enough figure. So we would help adult educators then to kind of give them skills to teach adults, because teaching an adult is totally different to teaching a child, you know. So I did that for nearly 12 years. And then I suppose the first thing that happened was my daughter got a very bad accident. Well, first of all, my daughter was born with a very rare medical condition. So, well, actually, sorry, I need to backtrack. So I've had a lot of stuff that's happened to me in my life, I suppose, which ties in with the theme fearless. At this stage, I probably am pretty fearless. The first thing that happened to me was when I was on my own Erasmus exchange program as an Erasmus student in France, when I was a student in UL. I had a very bad car accident at the age of 18, so I was only in second year in college. We were on our way home from a night out, excuse me, and myself and my French boyfriend at the time, and there were three other people in the back. One of the girls was a friend from college, from UL, who traveled over with me as well to work in France, and the other two were French students. And out of the five of us in the car, two died, my boyfriend and my friend from Tipperary, who had been in UL with me. And I was in hospital for nearly 3.5 months, I think. And I broke about 70% of the bones in my body, 300 stitches, internal bleeding, you name it, I had it basically. And it took me a long, long time to recover from that. And it was the first time, I suppose, I'd had an experience where, you know, life, I realized, was not fair, and bad things happen to good people, and you know, it took me a long time to recover from it. So I kind of, you know, got over it, as I thought, for a while, and then I got married and had my first child, and I had a very difficult pregnancy with my daughter. And turned out then, when I was 28 weeks pregnant, I went for a kind of a routine scan and realized quickly, the gynecologist realized very quickly something was wrong, and I was kept in then for the duration of the pregnancy. And Amelia was born with a very rare disease called congenital toxoplasmosis. So the worst case scenario is that what we were told while I was still pregnant was she could be born blind and severely brain damaged, and we wouldn't know until she was born. And I still had like 8 weeks left in the pregnancy at that stage. So that's very difficult to have all those thoughts going around in your head, and you know, continue with the pregnancy when you don't know whether your child is going to survive or not. So that was the second thing that happened to me, I suppose. And then after Amelia was born, following a load of kind of issues with the pregnancy, and when she was a baby, I developed very bad postnatal depression. And I kind of suffered with depression really on and off from that year when Amelia was born in 2005, really up to the last time I was depressed was probably 2015. So I've struggled with it kind of all my life, you know, adult life really. And then before I got my cancer, then the worst thing I suppose for me that ever happened in my life was my daughter Amelia, who already had enough issues as far as I would see, got very badly burned in an accident here at home. She was 7 at the time. A spark from the fire caught the back of her dress and literally went up in flames. It was like really watching something from a stunt movie. You know, I could see this fireball coming up her back. She ran into me in the kitchen screaming, and all I could see was flames. I could barely even see her. I'll never forget it. And, you know, she spent 6 weeks in hospital, you know, 2 fairly extensive skin graft surgeries and an awful lot of trauma for her and trauma for me and my husband, trying, you know, just, I still find it's the one thing I find very difficult to talk about because it traumatized me so much, to be honest. And then the following year I got diagnosed with cancer. So, you know, and then as everybody knows, you know, I got diagnosed with cancer in 2014 and did all the treatment, you know, thought I'd beat it and that, you know, they got it early enough. And then 3 years later, it came back worse than before. And I was told it was terminal. And not only was, you know, did I find out that I now had terminal cancer, I also found out at a meeting with my gynecologist that there was a chance that a smear that had been clear in 2011, just after I'd had my son actually, which had been clear, that smear actually was cancerous. So I had had cancer for 3 years without knowing it, and nobody, not that nobody told me, they didn't discover it until after I was diagnosed. I suppose they go back and review these smears. And that's when I decided then, when my cancer was terminal, that I'd have to do something about this and find out for definite for me and for my family whether or not I was misdiagnosed. And that has obviously led then to the whole cervical check scandal. So that's my life pretty much in a nutshell.
And how did you, when you first got that news that, you know, it could have been a case where there was a test that was wrong, how did that make you feel at the time?
Oh God, I was very angry. I was very angry because I kind of, you know, I went back then, you know, you do these stupid things, not stupid, but I think it's natural. You look back at photos and you think, you know, did I look like I had cancer in that picture? You know, it's stupid. It's totally irrational, but you kind of go back and think, did I miss something? And I kept thinking to myself, should I have gone to the doctor sooner? But I had no symptoms. I had absolutely no symptoms for, you know, when I went into my doctor with symptoms in 2014, 3 years later, the symptoms were only beginning to show at that stage because it had become invasive. You know what I mean? I'd started bleeding in between my periods. I had bled after sex on 1 or 2 occasions, and it was bright red blood. And, you know, people sometimes think I talk too graphically about this, but I think it's important that women know what to look out for. You know, I mean, menstrual blood is quite dark. This was very bright red. And the reason it's bright red is because it's the tumor. So your tumor is vascular. You know, in order for a tumor to survive, it has to have a blood supply. So, you know, what happens is a tumor starts to shed. So when it starts to shed, it bleeds. And the blood is bright red because it's vascular and it needs blood supply. So it's a bright red kind of a blood that you will see. And if you see that, literally, you know, that's a red flag that you really need to go to your GP. And I did, you know, I was very good. I was one of those people that always, I was meticulous about my health. I was always very healthy. I was never a big drinker. I never smoked. I ran marathons. You know, I was very healthy and very fit. So I knew this wasn't right for me, this type of bleeding. So I went in literally within I think it was on the 3rd month when I noticed I was bleeding for a 3rd month in between my periods. And that's when I was diagnosed first. But, you know, before that, I had absolutely no symptoms for 3 years, you know.
And I suppose, you know, when we go through life, we can seem, you know, you were very, very focused. You knew where you were going. Your life was kind of, although you've had difficulties and you've had the accident and the difficulties in your earlier years, you were relatively focused, I suppose. And then just an event comes by that you're not really expecting, and
yeah,
faced with that. So when you were faced with that thing, is that, you know, it's, as far as you were concerned, you were well, and everything was okay. And then all of a sudden your world was turned upside down and your whole life changed. How did you manage to cope with that and get your head around it?
Oh, with a lot of difficulty. I think, you know, I suppose, look, there was an advantage to having had so much shit thrown at me, I suppose, in that it was just another one. But it was the one that really floored me the most, I think, in some respects, because I was always very healthy. I had never been in hospital before I had cancer. Well, apart from the accident, but that was all broken bones. And once I got past that and I recovered really well from the accident, because I was one of those people, I did all the rehabilitation, I did all the swimming, I did all the physio, and I recovered extremely well. And I had no really bad side effects apart from, lower back pain, because I'd shattered my pelvis. So really, I had same with the pregnancy. I was really good. I was swimming all the way through my pregnancy until I discovered that there was something wrong. So to find out that I had cancer for me was, oh my God, it was like getting a punch in the stomach, because I never would have thought, and everybody I'm sure says this, but I never would have thought that I'd be somebody who would get cancer. But at the same time, from everything I've read up on cancer and how, often people, we have no idea how some cancers develop. Obviously, there are certain cancers that are caused by, your lifestyle. But like they often say that stress is a huge factor in cancer. And for me, I had so much stress leading up to the, 2 or 3 years before I got cancer. I often wonder, is that what led to my cancer diagnosis? And to be honest, I suppose in the last few years, one of the good things I've taken out of it is you have to look at the positives, Donna. That's what I do look at. People often say to me, I can't believe you're so positive, when you're facing into this terminal illness and you're going to die. And yet, you come across really positive. But I mean, I'm just grateful that I've seen so many people so ill with this disease, and so many people in bed, in hospitals and in a hospice and in pain. I'm not, and I'm blessed every day that I can get up and, the minute I wake up in the morning, I kind of do a quick assessment and I go, right, well, I've no more pain than usual. I can get out of bed, get up and do my normal, day-to-day routine, get the kids out the door to school. And I'm fine. I'm living at home. I'm not in hospital, so I'm grateful for every single day I get. And
I suppose when you look back at your life, and the word disease is, if you break it up, it's dis-ease. So I suppose your body obviously, and I think I would be very much on the same belief that our body does and is impacted by stress or by emotional. I'll speak about that later. But I think that to be positive, a lot of people find it very difficult to be positive in a situation that seems so horrendous. And as I said to you before, my own mom had cancer, and it's a strange one to deal with. There's a lot of people there don't know what to say, they don't know what to do, and like any circumstance, when we're faced with it, there's that unknown. It's how do you stay positive in that zone of unknown?
Well, there were times it was very difficult. I suppose when I was going through treatment, I certainly wasn't positive. I was floored. It took me, I think, my treatment was very sharp and short. And maybe that was a good thing in some respects, because I literally just went in, and anybody who's listening who has had cancer would probably tell you the same thing. When you're going through treatment, you're literally so focused on just trying to, get in there, do your treatment every day and do what you're told. And you go in and you have your radiation, you have your chemotherapy, and, you try and do other bits in the background yourself to make you feel kind of, less nauseous and whatever, and take your, rest when you can. But when the treatment ends, that's when it hit me, to be honest. When the treatment finished, so I had 5 weeks of radiation 5 days a week, chemotherapy 1 day a week, and then they gave me a break for 2 weeks, and then I had to go back up to Dublin then to have this treatment called brachytherapy. And I talk about this a lot because I really felt that I wasn't prepared for the treatment that they gave me. And I've spoken out about this a lot, and I've spoken to gynecologists and oncologists since I started speaking out about things, because I think women need to be prepared more for this type of treatment, because it's horrendous. It's a barbaric treatment, really. What they do is you get, I mean, anyone here who's had babies will know what I'm talking about. I had 3 epidurals in the space of 12 days. I mean, when you go in to have your baby, you have 1 epidural, it's hard enough to get over, the discomfort of it. But to have 3 epidurals in the space of 12 days, and then to have get knocked out 3 times. And what they do is they bring you down to the theatre, they knock you out, and then they insert this applicator up your vagina. And the applicator now is probably quite wide, which is why they have to knock you out to get it in. And then you're laid down flat on a bed. They roll you back up to the radiation room, and then they roll you in flat on your back, and they attach rods to this applicator, and they literally zap whatever is left inside your vagina. So everything is gone, your womb, your ovaries melted literally to, oblivion. And the The treatment itself is awful, and women often end up, and I ended up having to have 2 blood transfusions, a platelet transfusion. I was very sick, very ill for the 2 weeks. And then when I came home, it took me about 3 months, I think, really to recover from it. And it was the worst of it, really. And then you're left then. So, once treatment is finished, then you have to wait for 3 months. And this is the worst part for me of cancer treatment. And anyone here listening, I'm sure, will agree with me. You're left then for 3 months waiting to have a scan to see, did it work? So every day you're kind of checking yourself in the shower for lumps and wondering, or if you get a new pain, is this a new tumor? It's very hard to stay positive in all of that, but all I could do at the time was just take it literally. Sometimes it was 1 hour at a time, sometimes it was 1 day at a time. And sometimes, I was lucky that my kids were small enough at the time. They didn't really, my daughter was 9 and my son was 3. So they were young enough. They didn't really know what was going on. They just knew mommy was sick. And I didn't lose my hair. I was lucky. I didn't have the type of chemotherapy that would lose your hair. So I didn't look different. Well, I looked like shit, obviously, but I had my hair at least. So the kids were young enough that I could they distracted me. Kids are great that way. So I was trying to do small things with the kids when I had the energy, and that was as much as I could do. But there are days when you just have to stay in the bed, so you can't always be positive. It's not possible.
But I think your honesty, as everyone here who knows me, I think the honest approach, I mean, I think if people speak up, as you said, it's about speaking up and letting people know what's going on and not having to hide if you are having a difficult situation. Yeah. So anyone watching this can relate to this, Vicky, on some level, because everyone has been in some situation where you feel that there's that unknown, that waiting for, will things work out, or predicting the future and imagining it, or you're rehashing the past. And it's very difficult, I suppose, to deal with the present for a lot of people.
Yeah.
When you're in that situation, and you found, your kids were a great distraction, being positive, was important. How important do you think it is that if somebody just didn't feel like getting out of bed, so you go into bed and you might have your days, if you like, but then, okay, it's time, like today, you got up and you do what you need to do, and you get focused. So if there's people there who really just want to, I suppose, like an ostrich, shove their head in the sand and pretend things aren't happening, what would you say?
I know myself, I suppose, from the years I've suffered from depression, that the only things that worked for me to try and bring me out of it, even just for a short period, was to do the things that kind of helped bring me out of myself and get me out of my head. And for me, it was going for a walk. And I love water, so I'm lucky I live quite close to the university in Limerick here, so I walk down by the river when I'm home. I love the beach, so there's a favourite beach I go to. We're very lucky that we have a holiday home in West Clare, so I go down there as often as I can and I walk on the beach. For me, a walk always clears my head, and I always go on my own, because I think, you need sometimes that time out of away from kids, away from family, away from friends, and I'd switch off, and I'd literally, even if it's only to get out for that walk and listen to the sounds and really tune into it, because often what you're doing, people often, I'm guilty of it myself. You go for your walk and you're going around in your head going, right, when I go home now, I must do this, and I have to get the kids' uniforms ready now for tomorrow, and I have to make their lunches. And you're doing it all in your head while you're on your walk, but you're not actually relaxing. So I consciously would try when I'm on my walk to switch off, and I'd listen to the birds, and if it's a lovely day, look at the sky. And I suppose one of the good things that for me has come out of having, a situation where I know my time is limited is it has given me that, how would I call it, a gratitude, an appreciation of the small things in life, which I found very difficult to do when I wasn't in this situation. That's the only way I can describe it, that sometimes when you're told your time is up, you appreciate things more. It sounds crazy, but, most people will tell you that when they, are nearing the end of their lives, that they appreciate things far more because they know they're not going to have them for too long. Do you know what I mean? So I suppose that would be my advice. Whatever works for you. It might be a walk. Everybody's different. So if there's something that really, my mother, for example, she would kind of suffer with anxiety. She knits. My mother would knit till the cows come home. So she's always knitting for people's babies, or, but she knits because she finds that therapeutic. She'll put something on the television and she'll knit, and she finds that that's what soothes her. So whatever it is for you, for me, it's being outdoors, going for a walk by the water, by the river. Everybody is different, but find something that works for you and do it religiously, even if it's only for 20 minutes or an hour every day.
I think the reality is, you can be grateful, and you were told, I suppose, your fate ultimately, but the reality is that fate could be any of ours. It could be any of our now or after the call. We really don't know. So I think gratitude, and certainly for me as well, it's hugely important in any aspect of your life, and it really does give you that strength, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. You know, and for me, it really is the small things. I don't think it's the big things, you know, that you miss. And that's what COVID has been very difficult, I think, for a lot of people, that it's the small things that you miss, like meeting. For me now, I used to love meeting up with a friend for a coffee, you know what I mean, and having a chat, or no, go down to see my parents, you know, at the weekends, and that has been very difficult, you know. But again, you know, you have to, I suppose, you know, adjust. We've all had to adjust. But I mean, like everybody else, I have included people in my bubble because I think it's not healthy for us if we don't see some people. So, you know, I have, you know, 3 or 4 people that I see, that I have seen since COVID. And I do that for my sanity.
So everyone knows who's important to you then.
Exactly.
they're not priority, giving it all away now. I think, to be honest with you, Vicky, I think you're an absolute inspiration. One question that I'm sure a lot of people will ask, how on earth did you ask her this? But it's something that I asked my mom,
yeah,
cancer. And are you afraid
of dying? Yeah, I suppose I am. And that's why I've been campaigning for the Dying with Dignity bill, because unfortunately I have seen a number of friends die from this disease. And there are certain cancers where, you know, and it's not to pit one against the other, but there are certain cancers where death is not as easy as others. And unfortunately, the one I have is one of those where there is often an awful lot of pain at the end because of the complications, because where your tumors end up developing and spreading, you know, you'll end up with bowel obstruction, and a lot of pain comes from that, and pain in your back and tumors in your spine. And I have unfortunately seen a number of women, you know, in quite a lot of pain towards the end of their days. And that's why I was absolutely adamant about campaigning for the Dying with Dignity bill, because I don't think that's right. I think, you know, at that stage, you know, these women and me, when I get to that stage, you know, you're going to die. There's no coming back from it. So allow people to, you know, take an injection that will just kind of, you know, let you go gently, but let you, you know, get you to a point where you're still, you know, corpus mentis, and able to say goodbye to your family and your friends. So for me, I am worried about that, because obviously this bill is not going to be in time for me, I don't think, to be honest, with the state of the way things move so bloody slowly in this country. But at the same time, you know, I'm hoping that won't be the case. But look, yeah, it is something I do worry about. There are some mornings, particularly if I get new symptoms. Like a couple of weeks ago, I discovered I have a new tumor. So I have a new tumor in my lung, which is why I'm coughing a lot. Now it's small at this stage, but you know, it is a worry when you hear about, you get, you know, new tumors. You always, you know, that's the kind of, you start thinking, oh shit, is this the start, you know, the beginning of the end? But you can't, I don't go there. You allow yourself sometimes, you know, you get a bit of a fright, but then I pull myself back, because, you know, if I was to worry like that, you know, I'm nearly 3 years now since I was told I was terminal. So if I had been worrying like that for the last 3 years, sure, I'd have myself demented. So you can't do that. So as long as I'm feeling well, I'm good, and I don't really think about it too much. But when I get to that stage, I think
a lot of people do that. They think,
oh,
it's
too
in
far
your head.
Yeah, you do. And I was very guilty of it myself. I think you catastrophize an awful lot in your head before it even happens, and it's the worst thing you can do, because, you know, a lot of the times what is happening in your head actually doesn't materialize when it comes to it, you know. So if you can try and stop that, and it isn't easy. I've had to really train myself to stop thinking like that. But
So how do you do it?
I distract myself. I'll do something. So if it's like, often to me it happens at nighttime. If I go to bed, that's when everything is quiet and everybody's in bed and the kids are in bed and it's quiet. And sometimes a thought will come and I just go, you know that feeling you get where it just washes over you and you start panicking. And I just stop myself and I either sit up in the bed or I get up and I go and make myself either hot milk or you know, and I watch something on the television or I listen to music. I do something to distract myself from it, and then I go back to bed. And if that doesn't work, I get up again. But like, you know, most of the time it doesn't happen, and I can kind of bring myself down. But I usually have to get out of the bed, because if I don't get out of the bed, it'll just spiral and it'll get worse.
Yeah, well, I think everyone will relate to that, a busy mind and thoughts. I think everyone has been through a stage of your mind racing and not being able to sleep. So I think definitely getting out of bed and not have the association of having thoughts in bed is definitely a good idea.
Yeah, yeah. And I found the Calm app. I downloaded the Calm app, you know, or Headspace, any of those apps.
Right.
But I find the Calm app is great. There's these stories on it, and I find those really relaxing. So I would listen to one of those on my phone, and that would usually kind of send me off.
I haven't actually heard of that.
It's really good, yeah. Yeah, so they have these sleep stories, and they have all these famous actors, and they've anyone in there now into Harry Styles. His one is really good. Matthew McConaughey has one, and there's another British actress, Ava Green. Oh, I love her voice, and she does.
How does your husband feel with you, Matthew McConaughey, putting you to sleep? I don't think you'd be too happy about it.
Doesn't everybody have one of those? What do you call those? What's that thing? You know, you wouldn't throw. Everyone has that person that you know. If you had your choice, well, sorry now, but you know, he's mine. Matthew McConaughey would certainly be high up on my list.
Well, you do realise now Vicky Pat is on here, so we won't go. I'm only joking.
She has hers. She has hers.
Sure, you're only window shopping. It's not doing any harm, you know.
Vicky, your attitude, I think, is fantastic, and it's one thing that a lot of people at the moment are doing is it's almost like they're becoming overwhelmed by stuff in their head. So, this is a blunt statement to make, and I was guilty of it too. But a lot of people feel sorry for themselves, and I've done it, so I'm making that as a blanket thing. What do you say to those people who are feeling sorry for themselves? And if you like, I don't think anybody likes being miserable, but sometimes it's easier to sit in that comfort zone than it is to live life fully. So for somebody maybe who is afraid to live life fully and has been overwhelmed by their situations and circumstance and catastrophizing, what would you say to them? Find something that will take you away from that, out of your head, because it's all in your head. I discovered that, and I mean that was the one thing I did actually. You've described exactly what was in my head for years with depression, because that's exactly how I was. I always felt like poor me. Now, granted, I had a lot of reason to feel like that, particularly after my daughter's accident. But I became very bitter after my daughter's accident. I was so bitter and angry at the world. How could this happen to my child? And I wouldn't meet people, and if I did meet people, I was quite gruff with them, and I wouldn't socialize, and I was always angry, and you can't live like that, and my kids would notice, I was short with them, and it's no way to live. It isn't, because do you know what? The only person suffering at the end of the day was me and my children, particularly because I was, quite short with them, and, just not a nice person to be around. So I started, I had always been a runner anyway, but I started running again, and that was my saving grace, to be honest. So I ran myself, literally ran it out of me, and that worked for me, but it mightn't work for everybody. Whatever it is that works for you. Like for my mother, as I said, it's knitting. It mightn't be something like exercise, but for me, I always felt that I needed to do some type of exercise to kind of get the endorphins and to get out of my head, because once you get out of your head, then you see things differently. And I suppose, half the reason I ran as well was because, we were in a situation at the time where we would have been financially broke, really. I was the only person that was working in the house. Jim was a student. He'd lost his job with the recession. So, for me, it wasn't an option to go to the gym it had to be something that was free and buy a pair of runners and anyone can run. So that was a big thing for me, but I loved running, I have to say, and I really miss it. It's the one thing I miss the most. I can't run anymore. But that's what I found worked for me: running, headphones, and I was off then, and it didn't always kind of last. That effect didn't last for the whole day maybe, but I'd get a couple of hours, and that was enough. A couple of hours was enough to give me a bit of a boost. And it got better as I kind of, went on, and I could see a little bit of a chink. And that's all you need sometimes, is to see a little bit of a light, I think. Because it's very difficult, isn't it, to keep going? But I think the way that you said, you couldn't afford to go to the gym, so you just got your runners and went and ran. I think there's a lot said even in that statement, because a lot of people at the moment could quite easily use the excuse of we're all at home because of COVID, or we can't do this because of COVID, or whatever other circumstances. But you found a way within all of that. So
yeah, and I became like, my friends would laugh at me at the time, because one of the other things I tried to make a big effort at, because I could see the kids were suffering because of my depression. I could see that I wasn't a nice person to be around. And I thought, I have to make a better effort now and try and do things with them and, make life a bit more fun. And it was a struggle, I can tell you, at times, and I had to force myself to do these things. there were days I really didn't want to do it, but I had to, because I thought, I can't be selfish. I'm a mother. I have to think of my children as well, and they're suffering as well. So I was brilliant, again, because we had no money or very little. I'd try and find, I was brilliant on the, research is my thing, so I'd start looking at, places that had kind of, living social vouchers. I'd go off and find places that had 50% off or free days in, and we'd go off to these different places. I'd drive anywhere within a kind of an hour radius of where I lived. And if they had free entry, we'd go, and there'd be, playgrounds or whatever, and we'd bring lunch. I'd never, I might bring them in for a nice hot chocolate, but I couldn't afford to eat out at the time. So we'd bring the lunch with us, but they loved it. Kids don't care, they're not into kind of sitting out and eating meals. They just want to have fun. So that's what we did. We went off, and once they were off then doing their thing, I'd kind of bring a book with me or something and read, and I'd be, they'd play, I'd get my time to myself, and it was a win-win situation. So you can do these things on a shoestring.
And do you find it's difficult when you have kids to have to put up that, if you like, a brave face, or are you very honest with them as well?
I suppose as they've gotten older, I've become more honest with them. They, both of them know I have cancer. I mean, even when I was diagnosed the first time, Dara was only 3. And, obviously I didn't tell him I had cancer. He wouldn't have known what that meant, but I just told him Mommy had a sore belly. And that was all he needed to know at that stage. And as he got older, then I explained a bit more. And then my drawing is shit now, but I tried. And one of the things I explained to him, which he was big into Star Wars, I drew a tumor. Like the Death Star, like the Death Star in Star Wars. And I said, now, Dara, when they're shooting at the Death Star with their lasers, I said, the Death Star starts breaking away. I said, well, that's what they're trying to do with my tumor. I said, it's breaking away with this. And he understood that, like kids are great. You can tell them things in their own language and in ways that they'll understand. And I suppose for me, it was very important that I tell the kids that I was sick, because, and in fairness, one of the nurse, I remember when I started treatment the first time around, the nurse, took me aside before I started treatment and said that to me. She actually said, you need to tell your children, she asked me what age they were, and obviously that it was age appropriate, but you need to tell your children that you're sick. And I said, well, why wouldn't I tell them I'm sick? And she said, well, I've had people come in here who tell their children they're going on holidays, or they're, she said, you are going to be sick. She said, you're not going to be able to hide that from them. And she said, if you don't tell your children that, you're going through treatment and that, you're sick, they're going to imagine something far worse. And that's what children do. They go into their heads and their imagination is far worse.
I think adults do it too.
Well, of course we do. But it's not fair on children, because they don't understand if you don't explain it. So in fairness, my kids have always known all along what's happening, and I think for me, it's very important. And it has meant that they've had less trauma, I suppose. Do you know what I mean? Because they always know, and if I'm going away for treatment or if I'm going somewhere for a couple of days, I always tell them, and so they know I'm coming back, because that's very important too, So yeah, no, they're fully aware of everything now at this stage.
And you've come up against a lot, I suppose, in media and in your campaigning, and against the government, I suppose, in a way, and exposing them, if you like, and you've still persevered. Even with everything that has gone on, even with all the difficulties that you've had, you've managed to persevere. Honestly, I just think it's an absolutely incredible achievement what you're doing, because you're out there, people who could easily quite suppress you if they wanted. Your leadership is so strong, and by leadership, you're just an example to everybody.
It helps that I'm a stubborn bitch, Donna. Really, like
I'm your sister.
Like my mother would tell you that I was I'm the oldest of 5, and she said you were the most stubborn of the 5 of you. She said once you made your mind up, she said that was it. There was no winning you around, and I've never changed. Like if somebody tells me I can't do something, by God, will I do my very best to prove them wrong. I'm one of those kind of people. If you tell me something's black, I'll fucking tell you it's white. So I suppose at the same time, I'm not doing it out of spite, I'm doing it for the right reasons. And that's probably why it's been easier for me to do it, because, I often find with politicians, and I mean, I had no interest, like, it's people often say that to me, Jesus, how do you know so much? And I said, I had no interest in politics before this started. I mean, I knew what parties were up there and who was in government, but that was about the height of it now. I had no interest, none. So I've had to go up to speed very quick, and having to read the newspaper every day and see what's going on and keeping on top of it. Jesus, sometimes it would drive you crazy. But, at the same time, I find the only way I can explain it is, I suppose, I've never gotten caught out because I'm telling the truth. I'm always telling the truth. I'm not hiding anything, and I'm trying to do things for the right reasons and to help people and to change the system for the better. Whereas the politicians are always trying to get one over on you, really, and they're always trying to protect the state, and that's really what's happening. And you know, I think the more people that expose that that's what's going on and try to change, you know, that we will get there eventually. It might not happen in my lifetime, but I do think, you know, people are getting less tolerant of the bullshit that we're being spun, really, most of the time, you know.
And do you find that they can really come up against you, or do they leave you alone and to do whatever it is you feel is best?
Who's that?
The government. Do you find that they actually kind of come up against you, try and stop you being a voice, if you like?
Sometimes, yeah. I mean, I'd say they'd love if I just went away, but sure, that's not going to happen, you know, for another while. You know, in fairness, some of them are very good. There are some really good politicians up there who do have, you know, they're in there for the right reasons. But there are a lot of them in there, and it's all about the career and the big pension at the end of it, you know, and that's quite obvious. And you know, I have a very big bullshit radar, and I don't have a tolerance for you know, a lot of that, and they know it, you know. So.
But don't you get feisty? Even I notice a difference in your energy when you get that stubborn streak comes out.
Yeah, totally.
That's what we know exactly. That's where it comes from, you know.
Yeah.
We were doing some mentoring there last weekend, and I was saying to clients, you know, that sometimes what might appear like a negative emotion or a negative trait, if you like, you can use that for good. So it's very obvious that, yeah, people might say stubborn is a bad thing, but in your case, actually not. It's a brilliant thing.
No, it's funny you say that, because I have said that since. I often say to parents now, I said, if you have a child who's stubborn, encourage it, because do you know what? I tell you, stubbornness is a good trait to have, because it actually, for me, it's kept me alive. It is something that literally, it's a fight or flight type of thing, isn't it? It allows you to fight. Sometimes it's not a good thing if it goes with anger, you know, but if your stubbornness is to try and do something that's good, or to help yourself, well, then it can only be a good thing, you know. So for me, I think if you have a stubborn child, encourage it, really. As hard as it is. I mean, I have one myself. My daughter.
We have one too. Actually, yeah, there's 4.
Actually, we kill each other now, myself. You know, I mean, Amelia's 15 now, and she's so like me, it's actually scary. She's actually worse. So God love the country, I'll tell you, when she comes along, because she wants to be a lawyer. So Jesus is all I can say. But she would argue her way through the bag now. If you think I'm bad, she's worse.
But you know, that's what it's about, is really making a stance and making yourself counted, because we're all here, you know, for one go that we know of, and it's about making that matter and making the moments matter, and being grateful for the lives that we have. And you know, I just want to say, Vicky, from the bottom of my heart, I just think you're incredible. Even being here, I can see the comments coming up here. You know, I'm in awe of Vicky, Carol says, and we have Trace here saying, Vicky, you're a pillar of strength. Your raw honesty and selflessness is so inspiring. You know, there's comments there that are, I mean, there's more there as well, but obviously everyone is on the same page. And you're impacting people in the best way. And to me, that's as a life really well lived. You know,
and you know what? That's the way I look at it too. I just think, I never knew what I wanted to be when I grew up. It's funny, you know, even at the age, and this was even at the age of 39 now. I mean, I worked in education. I always knew I wanted to work in education. But like the job I was doing, as much as I loved it, you know, my sister's a hairdresser, and you know, there's 11 years between us. She's 35 now, but she knew from like the age of 7 that she wanted to be a hairdresser. She got one of those doll heads, you know, them doll heads we all got at Christmas when we were young, with the hair. And I
wished for one. I never got one.
Yeah, she got this doll at 7, and she never wavered. She got, and she never stopped playing with it. And she started working, sweeping floors in a hairdresser's at the age of 15. And she still to this day loves being a hairdresser. And I always envied her, because I thought, Jesus, you know, I wish I had that kind of, you know, just laser focus on what I wanted to do. And as much as I loved working in education, I always felt that there was something out there that I was missing. And you know what? Even though I'm not getting paid for what I do, this, I think, is what I was born to do. Honest to God, it's the one thing that brings me the most joy and satisfaction, you know, from helping other people and using my education to help other people. I get great satisfaction out of it. I love it, I have to say. And honestly, I honestly believe this is what I was put on this earth for, and that's why I do it.